Hey there, welcome to the Lead for Pollinators Log-In to Learn webinar. Our mission is to provide leadership, education, action, and development to support the health and sustainability of honeybees, native pollinators, and the keepers of the ecosystem. Now, we do record these webinars, and I believe our coordinator has pushed the record button. Thank you. So our webinars are supported by the following sponsors: Hispanic Marketing and Public Relations. Visit HispanicMPR.com for interviews, presentations, and more. We're also supported by Beauty Beyond Belief Seeds, which specializes in wildflower seeds, heirloom vegetable seeds, grass seeds, regional wildflower seeds, and special use wildflower mixes, including their line of 4 great pollinator mixes. Shop for your garden and pollinator habitat at bbbseed.com. 2 Million Blossoms magazine will awaken readers to the vast diversity of pollinating insects and animals. This quarterly magazine will delight, entertain, and name those well-adapted creatures buzzing through our world, because the more we know about pollinators, the better we can provide habitat. This quarterly magazine explores how bees, birds, butterflies, and bats enhance our planet. Subscribe today using the discount code word LEAD and receive $5 off the subscription rate for 1 year. Visit 2millionblossoms.com. OPN Seed has partnered with Lead for Pollinators with pollinator mixes created for beekeepers and anyone who wants to attract and support pollinators. You can get native seeds for eastern U.S. planting zones at OPN Seed. Go to the Lead for Pollinators website and select the Donor Affiliations page to order your pollinator habitat seeds. Select Support Our Cause to view featured seed selections, and a portion of sales generated from our website will help support our work. Live webinar presentations are recorded and can be viewed through our partner at Dove Audiovisual. Webinars will be posted 48 hours after the scheduled presentation date for pay-per-view. Missed a webinar? You can view these topics through our pay-per-view access. Visit our website for the recorded Log-In to Learn webinars and select a topic today. We are pleased to provide this webinar as part of the Lead for Pollinators Log-In to Learn series. Today, you will learn how pollinators are exposed to pesticides, the impact of pesticides upon pollinators and colonies of bees, and what you can do to reduce the impact of pesticides to native pollinators and to your honeybees. I am Michelle Colopy, the Executive Director of Lead for Pollinators, and our topic today is pesticides and beekeeping. So welcome, everyone. Now, our managed honeybees, because we use them to pollinate our crops, they migrate around the country with commercial beekeepers, and even within our cities, our honeybees are exposed to pesticides. They are exposed to herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, as well as the adjuvants and surfactants that are part of the formulated product for an herbicide, a fungicide, or an insecticide. And our pollinators and our honeybees are exposed throughout the year. Because of the many things impacting pesticides, there are really the 4 Ps: pests, pathogens, poor forage, and pesticides. Our honeybees have always had to deal with, as every living creature does, pests and pathogens. Poor forage is due to overdevelopment of habitat areas, to invasive species coming in that are wiping out native plants, and of course, to pesticides. So poor forage and pesticides are something we have a lot of control over managing those. We can work with our bees to address pests and pathogens to keep our bees healthy. We need to do just as much, if not more, to address the issues of poor forage and pesticides. Now, there are still far too many beekeepers and others who think pesticides don't kill honeybees. There are far too many people who think a pesticide used to kill, say, ants, only kills ants, or just to kill mosquitoes, only kills mosquitoes. That's not how pesticides work. They attack an invertebrate's nervous system or their ability to eat and retain food. This is what pesticides do. So when we do a basic search, and this isn't even a Google search, this is Firefox, but when we do a basic search and simply under academic research on the impact of pesticides, not the negative impact, I'm not mentioning a specific pesticide, just the impact of pesticides on honeybees. Within 20 seconds or less, you get over 2 million search results. The research is in, the pesticide labels mostly will tell you when pesticides are toxic to bees, and far too many of them are and have been for decades. So let's get past this misinformation that pesticides don't kill honeybees. Yes, they do. Because in the end you have, as I cleared this with an entomologist, you have two types of insects. You've got hard and crunchy, and you have soft and squishy. Beetles, hard and crunchy. Mosquitoes, soft and squishy. Honeybees, butterflies, bumblebees, soft and squishy. So for example, this product here with part of the label that's here, the active ingredient is naled. So 87% of this pesticide, this insecticide, contains naled. And the label clearly states it is toxic to honeybees. This product is used typically for mosquito control. But when you look at the environmental hazard section of the pesticide label, you will see that it's also toxic to fish, aquatic invertebrates, and remember, if you're a beekeeper, remember, our honeybees are invertebrates. So there are many aquatic invertebrates as well. Butterflies are invertebrates. Bumblebees, invertebrates. So if a pesticide is used to kill an invertebrate, it's going to kill your honeybees. But this environmental hazard statement also goes further to say it is highly toxic to bees. And they recommend ways to minimize the hazard. However, as beekeepers know, this so-called mitigation does not really solve the problem because our bees fly from sunrise to sunset. They don't stop working just because it's 2 hours before sunset or 2 hours after sunrise. They are working from when that sun comes up to when that sun goes down. So spraying a pesticide while bees are still active on a blooming crop will kill your bees. Now, the pesticide labels, of course, are governed by the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States, and the pesticide labels are created with the pesticide company, the manufacturers, having a great amount of input. So they help to create, they do the research on their pesticide product because the government does not want taxpayers paying for a private manufacturer's products research. So the industry does the research on their product. Yes, I agree, that's problematic. The industry does the research on the product. They propose the label. They propose the residue tolerance levels. EPA examines all of this research and they work to comprise a label that will not cause non-target insect damage. But when the industry submits their label, they are also working with EPA to establish the residue of the pesticide on the crop or the plant or in the soil or on the water, depending on how this pesticide is used. Remember, pesticides are herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides. So these residue tolerance levels are set for crops, for turf, for livestock, again, even products or crops livestock eats, there is a residue level that remains then in the muscle or organ meats of those livestock that EPA sets for these for the use of these pesticides. But it's not just the direct application of the pesticides, there's also an indirect or inadvertent tolerance level for residues. And these residues are really meant on how they impact us as humans, if we consume the crop or we consume the meat of livestock. So that when we look at in this country, how much the residue level can be, it really is based on, theoretically, it should in no way harm us. Again, no way harm us. Doesn't mean it won't harm the livestock. It won't damage companion plants. It might, pollute the water. It's really geared for the residue level of, will it basically make your arm drop off. So that's, if it doesn't, then EPA will register the pesticide. So when they're looking at the residue levels, they're looking at parts per million, parts per billion, and sometimes parts per trillion. Now, keep this in mind, because there's some information I'll share with you toward about 3/4 of the way in that will really just astound you, of a recent accident that happened with pesticides. So when you're looking at a parts per million, okay, it's like dissolving an ounce of salt into 7,500 gallons of water. You would think that's been diluted enough. Well, it used to be in the turn of the last century, so the 1920s, 1930s, we thought the solution to pollution was dilution. We are still under this delusion that it is the same with pesticides, that if we dilute them enough, they will not, one way, harm us, and they shouldn't have that much damage in the ecosystem. But we are finding many of these chemicals are forever chemicals, and whether it is parts per billion, million, trillion, those chemicals are sticking around, and they're continuing to cause damage to the environment and to critters like our bees. So certainly, pardon me, one of the poster children of pesticides the past 10, 15 years has been systemic insecticides, because they are highly toxic to bees. One of them certainly is imidacloprid. These are the neonicotinoid class of pesticides, or neonics for short. And you can see that the half-life of imidacloprid, and this is the length of time it takes for half of that chemical to degrade, because sunlight, the ultraviolet light in sunlight, does help to break down some of these chemicals. Not all of them, but some of them. And that's only if they are exposed to that sunlight. If they're buried in the soil, if those chemicals get buried into the sediment of rivers, the sunlight is not reaching them and that chemical stays active. So one application of imidacloprid has a half-life of 188 to 997 days, depending again on if it's, say, in the sediment of a river or sitting on top of a crop field. You have neonic seed treatments, and that's what that picture is of those Smurf colored seeds. And those colors are on there to make it clear to farmers that it is a pesticide coated seed. So there are no purple seeds that color in nature. So none of that Smurf blue color either. So those are clearly coatings on those seeds to warn people they are coated with pesticides. And many of them are coated with insecticides, fungicides, adjuvants, surfactants, and then this, weird color. So these neonic seed treatments, you have thiamethoxam, also again a neonic. It has a half-life of 5 to 638 days from one application. You have clothianidin, a half-life in the soil alone of 148 to over 1,100 days from one application. And this is how it continues from one application to expose your honeybees. Because if most of these seed treatments are put onto corn and soy, and when there is a heavy rain event after corn planting, much of these pesticides wash off of those seeds and get into the water system and the tributaries. And if your bees drink from that water, they can die, because these pesticides wash off and go into the waterways. So when we look at these systemic insecticides, it's not just one or two of them. And many of these neonics also will be used with other neonics because it boosts their toxicity. So this is the typical list of the neonics. There is clothianidin, dinotefuran, imidacloprid, thiamethoxam, nitinpyrum. I could go on the list. Now, the two I do have bolded are sulfoxaflor and flupyridifurone. They are two new neonics that the pesticide manufacturers say, yeah, they're not really neonics. They're kind of, but not really. It's kind of a new class, but we don't want to call it a neonic. Yeah, it still is. It still is a systemic, which means, as this graph shows, that when you have a coated seed planted into the ground, when you do a soil injection of any of these neonics, it is then pulled up into the vascular system of the plant, and then the pesticide is exuded through the pollen and the nectar of the plant. Your bees go and collect that pollen and nectar, and they take the pollen back to the hive with them, slowly killing their fellow nestmates, or they drink the nectar and die. So that is the biggest issue with these neonics, these systemic insecticides. Again, their half-life is far too long, and because they get into the vascular system of the plant, it makes the plant itself, the food itself for those bees, toxic. Now, insecticides also include, of course, the pyrethrins, the pyrethroids, and there are many synthetic pyrethroids. So to, again, kill soft, squishy bugs. Now, some of them are to kill hard, crunchy bugs, but most of them still soft, squishy bugs like your bees. And you can see the half-life of these pyrethroids. Again, all of them highly toxic. Used for mosquito control and other pest control. You can see that their toxicity, their half-life is different, whether it's in the soil, whether it's part of the vegetation, or in water. And again, beekeepers know our bees drink water. On really hot days, they drink the water, they take it back to the hive, they use it to cool the hive. Bees need water. And if that water has a film of pesticides on it, it will cause problems for your bees. Now, let's look at just some of the research, because the research has been going on for, well, like this one from 2010, so more than 10 years, probably going on 15, headed toward 20, because the neonics started coming out in the 1990s, and they started causing problems from day one. So when we look at the different research that I'm going to show you, you will see that it's not just one crop. It is not just one part of the country. It is not just in the United States. This research out of Penn State showed that they looked at migratory and other beekeepers across 23 states, even up into Canada, and across a variety of cropping systems. And they found 121 different pesticides and metabolites, or degradates. As the pesticide degrades, it often degrades into more toxic chemicals even. And they found these pesticides in wax, in pollen, in the bees, and associated hive samples. Now, pesticides at that hive residue level, the research has shown it's increasing mortality. So this isn't even at the residue level for us to consume a food or a crop or an organ meat from livestock. This is at just the hive residue level. And the study found that honeybee larvae were most sensitive compared to adults. Of course, we all know that. All little babies of any living creature are more sensitive to all of the things in their environment because they are just developing. That even inert ingredients are having a high toxicity level to larval bees. Now, these inert ingredients are part of that formulated product, and the research is finding more and more of these so-called inerts are not inert, and they're very ert. They are very active in that product, and that some of them actually boost the toxicity of the active ingredient. That this chronic dietary exposure to a mixture of fungicides, pesticides, and the formulation solvent has significant impact upon our honeybee populations. And that even the research is showing you can mix a couple of different pesticides and you're increasing the toxicity of each of those pesticides. Even with bee bread, which is fed to the baby bees, it is something, it is in a sense a fungus made by the bees, that if those bees are exposed to a fungicide, they bring some pollen in that has a fungicide on it, and they're making bee bread. They're now just damaging the whole purpose of bee bread, because a fungicide is going to wipe out the healthy fungus those baby bees need. We all have healthy bacteria we need for digestion. We all have, even plants have a good fungus around their roots, which helps to pull in the nutrients. But when you use a fungicide, you're damaging also the good funguses that we need in agriculture, in plants, and even within our beehives. So that even when looking at this study of trapped pollen across 12 European countries, they found 72 of 107 samples had one of 53 different pesticides. That's a lot of pesticides. One of 53 different pesticides. And that even the samples of bee bread had one, all of them had one of 17 different pesticides. And again, remember what I said, the pesticides typically break down with ultraviolet light. Well, our hives are these dark boxes that we don't let the sun in, because if we let the sun in, that means the lid is off and then the yellow jackets come in. So we have these dark boxes that keep these pesticides quite active that the bees accidentally bring in. And the research is even there, this was done in 2011, looking at how the pesticides move through the wax. And that this research was done looking at the residues within the hive that the bees are bringing back. They're either bringing it back because they're flying dust mops and they bring some of this dust back on their bodies, that they bring it back in the pollen, they bring it back in the nectar, and that as they put the pollen into the wax, into the wax frame, those pesticides move across the wax frame. It does not stay trapped in the cell. That even when, as some commercial beekeepers have shared, and it has been researched that sometimes the bees will know that pollen is toxic, and all they do is cap it off so that it can't be used, as that they cap it so it's a warning to the other bees. They are not realizing the pesticide is leaching through the walls of the frame and making toxic the cells around it. And that even whether you have a plastic foundation or not, it's not stopping the movement of those pesticides. And that these residues, the studies were showing that there's a delayed development of the bees, that the adult's lifespan is reduced, that there's a higher brood mortality. Well, of course, if the baby's nursery is polluted by a pesticide, of course you're going to have a higher brood mortality. And again, even when they looked at controlled brood comb, they found that chemical analysis showed the migration of those pesticide residues. So even if you have a plastic foundation in the middle, thinking, okay, that solid piece of plastic should keep it from going to the other side. No, it didn't. The pesticides loved traveling around that hive through the wax. So we know as beekeepers, certainly, that the lifespan of a worker bee is important to the longevity of that hive. So that when we look at the periods of service for all the bees as they emerge from their cells and their duties to keep that organism called the hive vital, thriving, sustainable, that if you interrupt any aspect of their lifespan, you're damaging the entire hive. You're throwing everything off kilter. Because if you have a pesticide kill that wipes out half your foraging bees, then the entrance bees and maybe even the ones that produce wax suddenly get pushed into go out and get food. So you're just throwing off the balance of the hive. You're starting right then and there to shorten the lifespan of the entire organism called the beehive. Now, there are certainly these unintended pesticide exposures, and there was a wonderful USGS government study looking at native bees. And what they found were certainly 19 current use pesticides, and they were detected in 39 out of 54 samples of native bees. That the neonics were certainly, of course, most frequently detected pesticides because, again, it's a popular pesticide and has been for a while because it's good at killing invertebrates. It's a cruel way to kill them, but it's good at killing invertebrates. But there still were other pesticides detected, the pyrethroids, organophosphates, fungicides, and herbicides in the native bees. There were these, basically the research said there were these unintended pesticide exposures where the land uses were overlapping. So when these researchers were looking at the native bees, they weren't looking on cropping systems, they were looking in native habitat to analyze these native bees. Many of them are ground-dwelling bees or wood-dwelling bees. But the pesticides drift from cropping areas or even from city areas where they were spraying for mosquitoes, for lawn pesticides, and there are these unintended pesticide exposures. And it was impacting the native bees as well. So that even though the chemicals were not strong enough to just outright kill the bees, it still had an adverse effect because of the levels of exposure. Again, shortening their lives, shortening their reproductive ability, and so you don't have enough bees wintering over for the next year or enough eggs laid that were viable eggs for native bees for next year. So it doesn't have to be an outright kill. These sub-lethal levels are also problematic for our native bees. There was a study that came out just a few days ago looking at, yes, neonics, but looking at native bees that nest in the soil, especially squash bees, which are needed to pollinate squash. Honeybees don't pollinate all of our crops because they don't like all of the new world crops. We want to remember our honeybees are foreigners. They are immigrants. They like the old world crops over in Europe. So while they will go to some of the crops in this country, the new world plants, they don't go to all of them. So that when we have bees like the squash bees or the blueberry bees, those are specifically for those native crops in this country, so that they are also ground-dwelling bees. And when we are using neonics in the soil, you're basically killing the very bees that live in the soil, that raise their young in the soil. They are, certainly it's not a huge nest like honeybees, but you can have areas where they have populated the area in order to, say in this case, pollinate squash. But the neonics that are soil injected, it's really 70% of the native bees build their nests in the ground, and 89% are being cut because of this use of one class of pesticides, neonicotinoids. So our water, of course, may also contain pesticides. And again, as I said, our bees need their water. My bees love my bird bath. So they never go for the water I put out for them. They want to go to the bird bath. But on a hot day, a strong hive can consume 1.5 gallons of water a day, a strong hive. And I want to make sure I've said that. I know in one presentation I seem to have said a bee can consume 1.5 gallons of water. We know that's not going to happen. That would be a really fat bee. So it is the entire hive that can consume 1.5 gallons of water a day. But you want it to be good water, clean water. Now, some bees like a little muddy water, but you don't want it to be and filled with pesticides. Some research was done back in 2014 looking at the corn belt, because so many of our corn and soy seeds were coated with neonic pesticides, fungicides, and again, those wonderful little goofy colors. But after a heavy rain event, those pesticides would wash off the seeds, and it really just highly increased and made toxic. You can see all those water systems in the corn belt that had high levels, toxic levels of neonics to the invertebrates. So it's not just affecting our bees, it's affecting the invertebrates in those waterways, those tributaries, fish spawning grounds. This is what is then the result of just planting corn. There are many commercial beekeepers now who keep their bees in almonds or move them out of almonds when they're done and move them up into the hills of California to wait out corn planting season, because far too many bees continue to die when corn is planted, just because when it is planted, some of the pesticide chips off the seed and blows through the air and lands on something in bloom, and then it will kill the bees. The pesticides coated on these seeds are horribly, horribly toxic. Now, there was an interesting thing that came out about, oh, this got to be a month or so ago, January. Yes, okay, that's 2 months ago now. We are in March. But it is interesting in that really it's impacting humans now. There is a plant out in Nebraska, and it was an ethanol plant that was taking in leftover pesticide-coated seeds, and it was using it to make ethanol. So they were burning it. And I'll read from the article in that the small town, and it's only a town of, it's no more than 1,500 people, but the people living there reported a stench of something rotten. And then they had eye and throat irritation. The people had nosebleeds. They saw dying bees. Birds and butterflies were disoriented. Pet dogs were ill and staggering about with dilated pupils. And this was due to the burning of neonic-coated seeds for ethanol. There were also fungicides, of course, on those seeds. Now, a waste product like this green mash stuff was created but found to be too toxic to use as animal feed. And this green mash, they thought they would use it then as a soil conditioner, but it's too polluting for water to use as a soil conditioner. Meanwhile, as you can see, this is in an open pit where the wind can pick up this dust, this off-burning ash, in a sense, of the seeds, and blow it on the wind to again make something toxic. Because just because you've burned it, it didn't go away. Now the EPA has looked into this, mostly the EPA in state of Nebraska, and the plant has been shut down, but they still have just this huge hazard out here of these open pits of neonics that just won't go away. And what they found when EPA came out to test this, that while EPA says a safe level for clothianidin and thiamethoxam is supposed to be 11 and 17.5 parts per billion. And yet this ethanol plant's property recorded clothianidin should have been 11 parts per billion at 427,000 parts per billion. Now thiamethoxam was supposed to have been at 17.5 parts per billion. It was detected at 85,000 parts per billion. And this is a result of burning neonic-coated seeds. But it is impacting humans, our pets, as well as, of course, birds, butterflies, and bees. So you have to understand about these pesticides. Just because you may use it and your arm doesn't drop off doesn't mean it isn't harmful to something else. Pesticide unto itself means it is there to kill something. It is a side. When we look at how these pesticides move through our environment, move through the environment of our bees, that again, it's traveling on the water, it's blowing on the wind, it gets into, it becomes a dust and lands on plants that are in bloom. It can get into the waterways and either stay active in the sediment. So you need to understand this as you site your own bees, as you look to maybe take your bees out to someone who's near farmland. Yeah, find out what they're planting and which way the wind blows, so that you have an understanding of the food sources for your bees, as well as the water sources. It's important to understand in order to keep your bees healthy. You can take some steps to keep your bees healthy and provide them with wonderful forage. Now, certainly ever since neonics came out, there's been a big struggle to try and get decent labels on these things, and they're labels. I wouldn't call them decent. But on some insecticides, now keep that in mind, insecticides, you will see this little diamond shape. That is, there it is, a little bigger. The EPA thinks that will warn you and pesticide users that it's toxic to bees. Now, most of us would really like either an X through there, or an X through the bee's eyes, or maybe on the bee on its back, those little legs in the air. No, the EPA didn't want to do that. So they did this little diamond shape, and that's supposed to tell you, do not use this around bees. However, this is only for some insecticides. It is not for fungicides and herbicides, and yet research is also showing us fungicides and herbicides are also highly problematic to bees, especially when they're mixed with other pesticides, because you're increasing the toxicity of every chemical you mix. And again, fungicides, because it can impact bee bread and again cause other problems when it gets into the hive. So you want to understand how you can protect your bees. There are a number of places. I know here in Ohio, we used to have the Sensitive Crop Registry, which then finally went over to Drift Watch. It's also known as Field Watch, and it's supposed to be a specialty crop registry. It's really geared for the specialty crop or organic industry. So it's not meant for where school playgrounds are to make sure nobody sprays pesticides around there. It's not meant for playgrounds. It's not meant for nursing homes. It's not meant for sensitive people. It is for specialty crops like organic that are trying to restrain the pesticide impact on those crops in order to remain organic. Now, typically with Drift Watch, there's also, I think within that, they have a bee check page. Just because a beekeeper registers with them does not mean a grower or an applicator has to contact you and tell you when they're going to spray. If you have bees in the area and you're not using them to pollinate that grower's crop, that farmer's crop, they don't have to tell you. It's all voluntary. So you must understand the limitations of these mapping systems. I have continually encouraged Field Watch to try to put on a bee kill tab on their website. They just don't want to do that. But you do understand that when you register your bees with one of these mapping systems, unless you're using your bees for commercial pollination, for crop pollination, and your bees are on that farmer's land, typically they are supposed to notify, depending on the pesticide that's used, that farmer is supposed to notify the very beekeeper they hired to pollinate their crop that they're going to spray. Doesn't mean that happens, because again, it's always voluntary. So do understand the limitations of these mapping systems. So there are ways we can reduce the pesticides in our hives. Certainly change your comb and frames at least every 3 years. Certainly those pictures of frames that I showed you before when we were talking about pesticides migrating across the frame and throughout the wax. I realize, yes, it takes time for the bees to draw out the comb. It's healthier for them. It's better wax. You're giving them a better home for them to use the very glands that Mother Nature gave them to make wax. So, you want to produce a healthy honey as well to sell. You don't want to use a 5, 6, and 7-year-old frame that has been filled and emptied and filled and emptied and filled and emptied, and pollen and brood, and and all these bees walking across it. Just swap out your frames. Give your bees a healthy home in which to live. And even if you're in an area where you think you don't have a lot of pesticide exposure, but there's road construction going on, the dust from the road construction can get in there and make those frames filthy. Give your bees healthy frames, healthy wax, as clean as you can get it. Let them draw that comb out. Reduce the pesticide use around your own hives, your garden, on your bee forage. There are still far too many beekeepers who, instead of using a weed whacker around their hives to cut down weeds or Queen Anne's lace or whatever, they use herbicides. Don't do that. The herbicide just drifts right into the hive because, again, it will blow on the wind. So put down rubber mats, put down cardboard, put down gravel, but don't use pesticides directly around your hives. Because to use a pesticide along with our varroacides, you're going to start to cause these synergisms that also are problematic for your bees. So since we do use a varroacide, which is an insecticide, in our hives, trying to reduce the pests in our hives, don't pile on with something around the hive, even if it's an herbicide. And again, herbicides and fungicides will not have that pollinator warning, the little bee in a triangle. They won't, or in the diamond, they won't have that on there because EPA doesn't require them to test a fungicide or an herbicide on bees. So reduce that pesticide use around your own hives. Read the pesticide labels of what you're using in your hive, as well as any place on your property, including for that golf course green lawn you want. Read the pesticide label. If your lawn care people just tell you, oh, this is safe, the EPA registered it, you need to get another lawn care company. If they will not share the pesticide label with you, they don't even know what it is. There are far too many of the lawn chemicals that are used for grub control. Those are neonics. Those are neonics. So if you have to use a pesticide for some reason, whether it's in your garden, your apple trees, use a short residual toxicity product. Do not use it during bloom. Read the full label. See if you can find an alternative, an organic alternative. But again, even read that label as to when you should use it and when you should not. Support those beneficial insects for pest control instead of reaching to a chemical. Often you will, if you just would wait 24 to 48 hours, the predators will finally realize there's food in your area, the pest, and then they will move in and eat it. But you have to give the beneficial insects time to realize there's a pest that they could feast on. Every year in my pollinator habitat, I have some little aphids or something that lay their foamy egg sacs on some plants, and within 48 hours, they are all gone because the ladybugs and other things have come in, eaten them, and then they move on. So support those beneficial insects for pest control. Educate your family, your friends, your neighbors to reduce their pesticides. Most lawn chemicals really run right off the lawn. They do not, on your typical urban lot, actually go into the soil because the grass roots are only about that deep, really. So that soil is so hard to pack, because if you live in a house like mine, which is almost 60 years old, so is that front yard. It is packed down from 60 years. And that front yard is what they dug out from my basement. So it's gravel and clay. So those pesticides you use for a supposedly green lawn are just running off your yard, going into the combined stormwater and sewer system, and then eventually gets to, in my neck of the woods, up to Lake Erie, damaging the water. So understand your watershed. Try to keep it as clean and healthy as you can. All of us will benefit from healthier, cleaner water. Now, if you want to help reduce the mosquito spray in your community, remove the standing water where mosquitoes breed, because we are the ones breeding mosquitoes. Either it's through retention ponds in our housing developments instead of allowing a natural wetland to remain a natural wetland. It is when we leave kids' toys out. We have potted plant saucers that a cup of water holds 1,000 mosquito eggs. If you want to have less mosquito spray done in your community in the summer, then get rid of mosquito habitat. Put in pollinator habitat, remove standing water, make sure your gutters drain. But instead of spraying for the mosquito invertebrates, again, soft and squishy insect, which will then kill your bees when we are spraying for mosquitoes. So in order to prevent the diseases of mosquito-borne insects, get rid of where they breed, and that's standing water. And again, save money and stop paying for those lawn chemicals. Protect the bee forage. Let those dandelions grow. You've got to talk to your spouse if they're the ones who, I don't want dandelions. Well, dandelions are wonderful. It's first spring flower. We all need to see some spring now. We all want to see, especially the bright yellow of dandelions. Let them grow. They just want to live. And it's wonderful early bloom food for our bees. And of course, protect that water. The water is important for all of us. So I want to thank everybody for, hopefully you enjoyed learning about pesticides and your bees and how we can work to keep our bees safe from pesticides. We certainly are offering more Log-In to Learn webinars. We have them on pay-per-view as well as our live schedule. Certainly our next one will be March 10th, featuring Missouri Extension educator Tamara Rial, and she's going to discuss habitat needs for native pollinators. But I would like to open it up if Terry would like to, I think, unmute us so we can ask any questions, or you can always write it in the chat. I'd be happy to take any questions. Ooh. I don't know if I can see the chat. Let me see. Nope.
Michelle,
Yes.
I do have a question from
Yes.
our call-in person,
Yes.
and they wanted to know if the Drift Watch does not offer the protection for the hobbyist beekeeper in their backyard, what would be the best way to go about finding out who would be doing the spraying in their area?
Well, and sadly, that varies per community.
Okay.
Some communities will put a notice in the newspaper in May saying, we will be spraying for mosquitoes from May until October. Okay, thanks. They don't tell you what they're spraying. You would have to then talk to your public health department and ask for the mosquito control district. I know just in my city, we have, and in my county, we have 3 different districts, mosquito control districts. So there's one for the biggest urban area and then the north and south of the county. So find out what mosquito district you're in. You can certainly go to the public health website. You check that one. Sometimes they won't even post a notice in the newspaper. As long as they post a notice someplace for the public, including their website, they've met the letter of the law of notifying people they're spraying for mosquitoes. But certainly talk with your local bee clubs if you are a beekeeper, possibly even your master gardener groups, to find out any issues with mosquitoes in the area. Certainly if there's West Nile virus that is a problem. Certainly I know Massachusetts and some other states like that that have horse populations. There's the encephalitis that is horrible to horses. So you're going to have different issues in different areas, different states. Certainly after hurricanes, that's just the worst. Far too often a pesticide is just poured into pools or into holes that were left when a tree hit. And this is then sometimes where bees will go to source in that former tree hole and drink the water and die. So it does take all of us, especially as beekeepers, but as community members, to find out what pesticides are being used for mosquito control, because that does affect our health from the pesticides being sprayed, as well as the diseases mosquitoes can carry. There are many things we can do in our local communities, but yeah, mosquito spray does not have to be put on Drift Watch because it's a public health concern. So the Drift Watch is really only for sensitive crops. I think that was probably more than the caller wanted, but are there, certainly I'm available to answer any other questions. My email is there, our phone number is there. And you know, it's a hard thing to deal with our bees, but we can work with our fellow beekeepers and our neighbors. Certainly a jar of honey is the best way to go and talk to your neighbors about the lawn care chemicals they're using. And we can work to make sure that, and you can always start with the argument of, do you like lightning bugs? Because often when we spray for mosquitoes at night, you are wiping out the lightning bugs. And we all like lightning bugs. They make summer. So talk to your public health department, talk to your neighbors, and make sure we are protecting all of the invertebrates, not just our honeybees and native bees. Okay, well, certainly if anybody has any other questions, you can follow up with us. You can always find this if you want to share this presentation with anyone. They can access it on our pay-per-view through our website. And it has been wonderful to share this information with you and to help you work to keep your bees healthy and safe so that we all have delicious honey and healthy honeybees. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and we'll see you at another webinar. Thank you.